Will you join with me in a moment of prayer? God of glory, fill your church with the power that flows from Christ's resurrection. Startle us with your truth and open our minds and hearts to the transforming power of your Spirit, that together we may signal the beginning of a renewed humanity, risen to new life with Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. Amen. During the last years of her professional life, my mom worked at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. And she finally retired at age 81, which puts me to shame. I think it was a new computer system they were wanting to introduce into the school, and she said, I don't need to learn a new computer system. I think it's time for me to retire. But she loved what she did. She loved meeting and working with professors, interacting with all the international students, literally from everywhere. And I think if she could, she would have adopted every single one of them. So when I saw, as you may well have, this report about a week ago or so of scientists being able to take a picture finally of a black hole, did some of you see that? Startling. I mean, they knew it was there, but I think this was the first picture evidence of it. It reminded me of another team of scientists. They're from Caltech. Some researchers who found evidence of this giant planet tracing this kind of bizarre, highly elongated orbit in the outer reaches of the solar system. The object, which the researchers nicknamed Planet 9, how original is that, has a mass of about 10 times that of planet Earth, and it orbits about 20 times further out from the planet Neptune. And it takes about 10,000 to 20,000 years for this planet to make one orbit around our sun. The researchers, Konstantin Batagin and Mike Brown, discovered this planet existence through mathematical modeling and computer simulations. And recent reports just in March continue to confirm that these two scientists have it right. There is this Planet 9 out there doing its work. Because the objects in the farthest part of space, they say, could not be moving as they are unless this thing existed. It must be there, one astronomer said. Nothing else could exert such influence. Now you may recall, back in August 24th of 2006, we had to get out our black Sharpies and mark Pluto off of our solar system rings. They demoted Pluto from being a planet, and now we are supposed to consider putting in Planet 9 in its place. And it is hard. If you're anything like me, it's always hard to make these kinds of adjustments or to think on the scale that these researchers think on. It sort of blows your mind and your world apart. But as my clergy colleague, Thea Monroe says, sometimes accepted facts change in light of new evidence. And don't you think that's what the earth-shattering good news of Easter is all about? Luke says that there was this group of women who had come up from Galilee to Jerusalem with Jesus. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and others, apparently. And they came out in the early morning hours to that garden area, as we come to think of it, still thinking that they knew all the facts. Much like the obit we heard at the beginning of worship could have enumerated, in a sense, all of that. They had been there when Jesus was crucified. They had seen him die, taken down from the cross, laid in the tomb. And as they approached the tomb, even though it was still dark, they were sure that what they would find his body, and they would be able to take all the spices and ointments that they had been preparing and do the proper burial ritual, anointing his body, as they had done for all their other relatives who had died earlier. Luke's writing really makes it so easy to imagine all of this. The rock-hewn tomb, the linen cloth, heavy stones, the fragrant spices. No wonder artists down through the centuries have been able to paint and kind of create this scene with such clarity. However, Luke's masterful storytelling makes it clear that the moment we think we know it all, we don't know a thing. The Jesus the women were seeking, he says, not there. He is risen. Now, coming to terms with that announcement was as difficult for those women as it has been in every generation since down to this day for you and me gathered here. From the Apostle Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, we know that early church community itself struggled with doubts around what had happened, what the resurrection was like, what it meant. In essence, Paul tells them, unless Christ is raised, then all is lost. Our hope is gone. For Paul and those fired up women and those first disciples, the resurrection was just not part of the story. A kind of nice little ending on it to give us all a smile on our face when the final chapter closes. No, without the resurrection, there is no story. Without the resurrection, there is no point in telling the story of Jesus' life, his ministry, and the kingdom that he came to inaugurate. Here in those early morning hours, with the words, he is risen, sort of shattering the calm that lay over that garden like a shroud, this is where it all began. The power of God that raised Jesus in those moments was let loose into the world and began its transforming work in the lives of you and me and so many others down through the ages. When we see people putting their faith into action, sometimes at great personal risk, it's because of that day. As they deliver meals, and I've known people who take those meals on wheels faithfully into parts of a city, a community that may not be considered that safe. Why do they do that? Because of that day. When people go to prisons to visit those who may have committed some kind of violent crime, why do they do that? Well, it's because of that day. When every day there are millions of acts of compassion and mercy and forgiveness and love done without fanfare by those who follow Jesus of Nazareth. Why do we do that? It's because of that day. Theologian John Whale once said that the Gospels do not explain the resurrection. The resurrection explains the Gospels. I agree. I believe these words. He is risen. Even though I cannot prove it, all the Gospel writers make it clear that no one was there really when God raised Jesus in that moment. There was no videotape. No one was there. Just like no one has seen Planet 9. But what else could exert such influence? Only the resurrection could turn a cowardly Peter into that great, bold apostle that when he was told to shut up and sit down, stop preaching this Jesus, what did he do? Sorry, I can't stop. Only the resurrection could have turned Saul, who was an avid, relentless persecutor of the early church. You know the story. And what did he became its most celebrated missionary. Why? Only the resurrection explains what happens in people's lives, like that of Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, Oscar Romero, and the countless people, which if we took time this morning, you could say, I got one for that list. People who can show that same kind of commitment and love and compassion, where the Spirit turns us into saints and martyrs, into preachers and to prophets, activists and organizers. All the people down through the ages, including us, who respond to that good news that He is risen, and who open ourselves to the transforming work of Christ's Spirit. And if we have ears to hear, those same words still echo through our streets and out into our world, into the places where darkness seeks to overshadow the love that broke forth on that first Easter morning. Here in the early morning hours on the first day of the week, beginning first with these women disciples, and extending down through the generations to include you and me. This is where it still all begins. This is where the transforming power of God plants seeds of new life within you and me, as we continue to respond to both the promise and the hope that we hear in those words that usually begin with, don't be afraid. He's not here. He is risen. Hallelujah. Amen. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for bringing us to another glorious Easter morning, where you invite us to join the women at the tomb and be startled again by the good news that Jesus is risen. Yes, we may have come from a variety of places, some of us from places of rejoicing, many of us from a place of struggle and desperate for hope. Whatever our station this morning, Lord, give us the power to reclaim your promise that you have come to give us life and to give it abundantly.